Thank you so much. So I want to welcome everyone today to WeCo's webinar, Making Visual Design Accessible. And I hope that you come away with this feeling empowered and excited because that's our goal. So this is part of WeCo's webinar free learning series. And this is something that we offer as a mission-based company because we believe it's important to share our knowledge with the wider community to help everyone understand the needs of users who live with disabilities. So I just have to give this little disclaimer when we start. This information found in this presentation includes tips based upon the experiences and opinions of digital accessibility by WeCo staff and should not be construed as legal advice. Regarding the development of an implementation of digital accessibility practices, it's advisable to seek the advice of qualified legal counsel. The information in this presentation is the property of the Wehrman Collaborative LLC, which is our fancy name. Please ask us before distributing this information, and you can contact us at accessinfo@theweco.com. Accessibility note, this presentation includes audio description for non-visual users as part of the narration. We also have ASL interpretation available today and captioning. So this slide shows the title of our presentation and includes WeCo's logo, the International Association of Accessibility Professionals member logo, the Disability in Disability-Owned Business Enterprise logo, and the WeCo logo is going to be repeated on most of the slides in this presentation. My name is Lynn Wehrman. I am a former federal program coordinator, and as you heard earlier, I actually used to work on CMAQ grant and commuter programs in downtown Minneapolis in the life I had before federal program coordination. So I was very, very privileged to have a wonderful education experience as a writer and to be able to take my writing education into promoting non-motorized transportation options and then also moving over to the Minnesota Department of Transportation, which I call my career perfect storm, just a mix of things that brought me to WeCo. And I was eventually brought on to MnDOT's ADA transition plan to be the communications coordinator to figure out how to make the ADA transition plan website accessible to people who live with disabilities back in a time when a lot of people didn't know what that meant. I grew up in a family of generations of cognitive disabilities. I and my sisters were all born with different forms of epilepsy. And I also was born with 2 major forms of mental illness. So I have known disability and lived disability my entire life, and disabilities that are really difficult to talk about in public. But that long and winding road led me to the ADA transition plan and to become really good friends with the stakeholders who lived with disabilities. And together we figured out how to make that website accessible. And we decided to create this company of subject matter experts who live with disabilities. So that's how I wound up here today. So first, a little bit more about our company. WeCo is a company of digital accessibility professionals who live with disabilities. In fact, we view our disabilities as a skill set, and we require that those of us doing accessibility technical work need to live with a disability to deliver on that work. We're members of the International Association of Accessibility Professionals and a disability-owned business enterprise. This slide shows the IAP and disability-owned business enterprise logos. It also shows Dane, one of our accessibility specialists, who's using screen magnification software in an accessibility audit. And we have the words on this slide because simulations can't replace human experience. Quick overview of what we do. We offer manual accessibility audit services to help your team pinpoint which areas of your project are accessible and those that are not. And we also provide customized recommendations on how to fix those issues. We really focus on teaching people how to fix their own issues so they become accessibility independent. WeCo also offers a unique disability-focused usability testing team. So we have a team of testers who live with cognitive, hearing, mobility, and sight-related disabilities that can test your website or your software from their homes. So we pride ourselves in teaching accessibility through interaction. This includes live remediation sessions with teams, on-demand learning through our WeCology learning platform, and customized training for your groups too. On this slide is a photo of a hand pointing at a tablet device with people watching in the background. So let's just launch right into what we're going to discuss today. It's very simple, 4 basic things. We're going to go through inaccessible design and why it excludes, how users with disabilities interact with visual design for non-visual users, and more, steps you can take to become more inclusive, and resources for learning more. We will also slow down at the end and take questions, but if you have a question along the way, you can feel free to pop that into the chat box. Ellen is one of our moderators, and she will make sure that I'm aware of that. And then we also have Chad as one of our moderators too that can help you if you have any questions. Why is visual access so important to people with disabilities? For many of the same reasons it's important to people without disabilities, including providing subtle nuances to the information that you're presenting, adding more depth of meaning, allowing people to join in the emotion of an event or a topic, but most of all, to provide all users with the same information, creating inclusion. This slide shows a person seated in a wheelchair, touching a wedding gown in a store, a person with a service dog, a white cane, seated in a park, and a watercolor palette and painting on a table. This begins to make more sense when you understand that people who cannot see the visual aspects of your designs still benefit from them. First, it's important to know that through the technology of screen reader and screen magnification software, users with no or limited vision encounter nearly all of the elements on a web page in documents and in software. Their screen reader users use the code structure within the page as navigation or wayfinding points. This enables them to find what they need and want more easily and quicker. Certain aspects of code may also be used by individuals with cognitive disabilities. To better understand the content, the slide shows a person seated at a table wearing headphones, listening to a web page through screen reader software. So we're going to first of all demonstrate this by giving you a great introduction to how screen readers work and how non-visual website navigation works with our guide, Mark Sutton, from the University of California's San Francisco's Digital Accessibility Services Department. So this slide shows a screenshot of Mark conducting the demonstration in the upcoming video. I am just going to make sure that I am properly sharing my sound so that you get that, and we will get the video going.
This is Mark Sutton.
Oh, sorry.
From the University of California, San Francisco's IT Web Services Department. Here today with a brief tour of screen reading technology. I'm a blind person who has been using screen readers, braille writers, scanning equipment, other adaptive technologies since my childhood. What a screen reader does is, for example, I'm going to start to read this page.
Navigation line. Link. University of California, San Francisco. Link. About UCSF. Link. Search UCSF.
And what I will now do is slow down the speech rate.
Rate 80%, 75%, 70%, 65%, 60%, 55%, 50%, 45%, 40%. Link. UCSF Medical Center.
So as I was about to say, a screen reader converts what's on a computer screen into information that can be displayed through synthetic speech or Braille output. And it does that by allowing you to use a computer instead of a mouse, a computer keyboard instead of a mouse. You can also use a Braille display as an input device.
End of navigation.
And what it does is it cleverly determines what's on the screen and presents you that information in a way that would allow for efficient navigation of these pages. So for example, I could just keep reading.
Banner 3 items. Visited, link, image, home.
Line by line, and we could be here all day. Or I could jump to the first heading on the page.
Heading level 2, search for heading level 2, you are here. Heading level 1, make videos accessible.
So as I'm moving down through the page, I can look for the category that interests me. And I'm just using commands built into the screen reader. So that's all a pretty simple description of what a screen reader is all about. Now I'm going to go over and show a few examples of how that can fall apart. So I have a couple graphics on this page.
Mark Sutton hands on a MacBook Pro image.
So the first one is well described and uses an alt tag.
You are currently on it. To
describe what that graphic is all about. Now we go to the next graphic.
Reader 042116.jpg.
Much less useful. So it's important to use those elements. It's also true for tables. So I'm going to move to a table.
FDA approved medications. Table, 3 columns, 5 rows. FDA approved medications.
So the table is pretty self-explanatory, and I'm going to move into the table.
Medicine. Approved. Column 2 of 3.
And then if I go down into the table.
Medicine. Tolbutamide.
And as I move across.
Approved. 1975. Column 2 of 3.
We're getting the labels for the column headers and row headers. So it's important when programming tables, forms, and other elements on the web pages to use the proper HTML codes. I'll go to the
table 3 columns.
Second table on the page.
Medicine. Row 2 of 5 tolbutamide.
And as I'm in the table, I move across it.
Row November 1995.
I get a date, but I don't know what that date is associated with. So it's important, as I was saying, to include proper coding tags for all these elements. These are just a few highlights of a screen.
Okay. Is there anybody that this is the first time you've seen a screen reader operate? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Valerie. Was the audio not working for everyone?
Audio was a little choppy. Never seen a screen reader before.
All right.
Informative. I already know about titling your images instead of 1244.jpg because I can't find anything on my own computer.
You can also just search this. This is on Google, and Mark has other things you can watch too. So if you weren't able to hear everything, yep. Sorry about the experience. Oh, great. I just think that the screen reader, I remember, you know, for me as a user with cognitive disabilities, I remember the first time I got to watch a screen reader operate in the home of one of our stakeholders at the Minnesota Department of Transportation. And, you know, the first thing I thought is that you can't drive that thing without a license because, you know, people that get good at using screen readers can listen very quickly and they can listen to it at a rapid speed. But I really felt that this really demonstrated how, okay, thanks for sharing that, Dana, that's your first time. But I really think it demonstrates how our visual aspects of what we do on websites can be translated to people. You know, alt tags are just a very basic concept of that. So I thought this was a good demonstration to show you.
It's also highly informative just to see how, you know, how it works, how other people are getting around all that stuff. It's education.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've got some interesting things to share with you, some in part from our experience of working with creative firms and education firms on digital accessibility and visual access. Um, Non-visual users may also use their hands to feel information, including visual elements of your design. Some of these may translate directly into other digital formats and some into non-digital formats. Here are a few examples. So raised illustrations, such as in engraved print on a document. So a very simple example of that would be like an engraved wedding invitation, okay? Printed logos, embroidery can be a great tool to convey information. And I'm showing an example of a security embroidered logo on this slide. But the story I want to tell you is that one of the funnest things that we ever did in the early days of our company, when most of our people were still in the Midwest, now we have people all over the country, but we used to have a holiday party. And one year we decided that we were going to get everybody winter wear for Christmas, for a holiday party, and give this to them. And we had the WeCo logo embroidered on like headbands and scarves and watch caps. And we actually have a really cute picture of all of us posed in these. But the thing that was really interesting to me that I hadn't thought about is one of our testers who's blind came up to me and said, now I know what the WeCo logo is. I understand what it is because I can feel it. And that's when we really started to understand that communicating that logo tactily to members of our team was a really inclusive thing that we could do. The other thing that I think is interesting is clay forms. So we have a client that creates learning software that teaches elementary school children how to write and form their letters. They were very, very concerned that this be totally accessible to children who are blind. So they decided to include clay packs within their software so that teachers could allow students, non-visual users who were students, to form letters with clay. And it worked wonderfully well for them. It's just an idea to get some juices flowing on creativity and sharing visual aspects with non-visual users. But of course, there is the Braille laptop. We're showing that in the lowest picture to the left. One of our lead testers, Maureen Pranghofer, that's her HIMSS Braille Sense. It's her hand on the laptop. This is a laptop that will essentially, the cursor will go over the words and translate it directly into Braille with changeable dots right beneath her fingers. It's a lot like if you go to a science museum and you see a wall of pins and you put your hand and your face into it and it stays, it's kind of that concept. And I remember the first time I encountered a Braille laptop when I was working at the Minnesota DOT on the ADA project. And my question was, how does someone who is deaf-blind access information? And this, of course, was the answer. And I was very, very fascinated with those laptops. Now, Maureen has full use of her hearing, but she loves Braille and she likes to print Braille and read things, just a lot like when I get a contract, I will print it and read it and mark it up because it's easier for me to digest. Some people have that preference that they want to feel that those words beneath their fingers. So that's just important to keep in mind. For users with cognitive disabilities like me, visual information is extremely important. So this is a time where I kind of go off on a tangent saying that when you start to work on digital accessibility, it's really, really common for organizations, teams, and groups to get focused on making things accessible to someone who's low vision or blind. And I think that's just because it feels to a lot of people very, very foreign. And what I've heard oftentimes from clients is we don't really have to worry about people who live with cognitive disabilities. And that is not true at all. You do. But one of the things that I think that I like to empower visual designers over is that You may be told that your visual designs are not useful to people who live with disabilities because that generalization, or you can't make something pretty or sharp and have it be accessible. That is not true. I'd like you to keep in mind that there is a very wide population of users with cognitive disabilities that depend upon what you create visually, on things that are aesthetically pleasing, on graphics that clarify points. That these are really important to those of us who live with cognitive disabilities. So, for instance, it can provide clarity to text, it can break up dense information, it can allow people to concentrate better. And really, when you think about it, most of us are visual learners, much more so than just most of us like to see some visual examples rather than just reading dense text. So I'm hoping that you come away from that realizing that there's a lot of importance to what you do with visual design for those of us with cognitive disabilities. This slide shows two people working on a clear schematics board together. When we think of what we create as only visual, we miss opportunities to include everyone in our designs. So let's break this down. First, I'm just going to recap this point. As the screen reader video taught us, code plays an important role in accessibility of our visual designs. That's because code is the translation tool that allows some users with disabilities to access what others see by hearing it read aloud. Code can provide information and provide navigation points, kind of like hand railings for our design. Many of the software products that we use already contain built-in accessibility features that are relied upon by people with disabilities. The screenshot we're showing on this slide is of a Word document, and toolbar is a great example. So that is how you add code to a Word document through the style. Word, in a sense, has its own cascading style sheet. When using the style toolbar to create structural headings, for example, the document is coded with navigation points. This is the same principle CSS plays on websites. If we don't realize that the structural elements in documents and web pages are also navigation points, we might remove them and unwittingly in our quest to make a document or a page look in a certain way. But there are easy ways to keep accessibility features in documents and keep those beautiful visual designs there as well. So a great example of how accessibility features can be removed or retained can be found in this video of a Microsoft PowerPoint presentation. And I apologize, I was kind of caught up in the moment when I did this, and I just did it with my camera. So it goes off some of the tools a little bit, but you'll get the idea. So I'm going to just show this real quick here. Oops.
Welcome to a WeCo Accessibility Services quick tip.
Is the sound coming through?
Yep.
Okay.
Video on what makes PowerPoints accessible and inaccessible to non-visual users. Today we're using a template that was created for us by our graphic artist to ensure that what we create blends with our visual brand. But what our graphic artist did not realize when she created the template, that she was essentially removing all of the elements that would make the template accessible to non-visual users by making it visually pleasing. There is actually a way that you can do both, and we're going to talk about that today. So when we take a look at this, we're looking at what looks like a headline and a subhead and a footer, and then we're also looking at some visual accent elements that contains our tagline, accessible, aware, independent, with small dots at the bottom, and then we're also looking at our logo. And the way that you can tell whether or not you're making a PowerPoint accessible is really not very hard at all. If you just go into the view section of your PowerPoint and select outline view, it will show you what is actually built into the code. Okay, so on this particular slide, what we have, this is one that we've actually done some work in, is that we have the footer showing up, because what we have done is inserted a formal box that, well, used the box for the layout that already exists. So what we're talking about when we do that is when you go into Home and you go into Layout. Notice that this one is title and content. So what we've done is that we've used a content box here to add in our logo through the option for adding a visual, and we've added the footer in to the formal content box, so that when we click on this, you can see that we were able to add the alternative text tag there. That shows up, and that we're also able to have the footer pick up in the outline view. So let's go on to the next slide. So we go on to the next slide, and when we look at this here, we see that there is nothing picking up. And that is because what oftentimes happens is that graphic artists get very, very used to basically going here and saying, okay, I want to make this look a certain way. I'm going to insert a text box. And so that's what they do. And they can take that text box and expand it to whatever size they want, and they can type what they want into it, and they can select that. Move that up a little bit so you can see it. They can select that text and say, okay, let's go ahead and make this look like a title. So we're going to want it to be 48, and let's say we want it to be bright orange. And that is how they're doing that. And this stuff is not actually picking up when you go and look at the outline view. So the easiest way that you can do this, and sometimes this is something when we get a product like this from our graphic artist, then we pretty much always know that we're going to have to go in and fix the whole thing for accessibility, is that all you have to do is just go into the Home tab and go to Layout and go, okay, well, what represents this slide? Well, this really looks like it is going to be, you can decide whatever it is you need. Is it going to be a section header? Is it going to be a title slide? We're going to call this one a title slide. And then what you can do is, I usually just click that out of the way, and you can cut it, and you can paste it right in there, and bingo, there it shows up. So, and then also we've done a little bit of advanced work on this. We went in and added alternative text tags for these as well.
Okay, was that eye-opening to anybody? Has anybody done that to a PowerPoint before? We forgive you.
I'm not sure I understand how to make it accessible, but I am now aware that that's an aspect that I did not know about before. So you could not have just simply selected that title and added a caption or something in on the right?
That's another class, but I'll just tell you that if you use the structure that exists in PowerPoint, you're way ahead than if you strip all the boxes out and start over. So,
Well, I generally don't use PowerPoint.
But you
okay.
I'm a little afraid of it, so.
Well, this is the audience participation part. So I'm going to give you a few minutes because we're going to be talking about alternative text tags next. We're getting towards the end of the webinar. One of the most powerful ways we can make visual design accessible to everyone is by adding descriptions of our images or alternative text tags. And this is to anything that's visual: charts, graphs, illustrations, photos, images. This is your imaginary project. So you have been assigned to describe this image for people who may encounter it without seeing it, or who may see it but have difficulty understanding what it means. Take a minute to compose an alternative text tag, and you can certainly enter that into the chat box. We will not describe the image on this slide for non-visual users right now. We're going to allow visual users in our class to do that for you today at the end of this exercise. And it is up to you, whatever viewpoint, whatever you think this image is attached to, you can create the backstory. So we're just going to give you a few minutes. Oh, Georgia, thank you for saying that. I swear to God every day that what I do is not rocket science, and somebody is going to find that out. maybe explaining it to people is rocket science, but this accessibility is not. Okay, thank you, Doug. Little Jenny in a green monster costume. Adam, child wearing, oh, oops, I'm trying, they're coming in fast and furious.
One issue this raises is that context
Yes,
can change enormously just on the description and who it's for and where it's going. This could have a completely different caption in a story about the kid than it can in something about child raising or
right,
storytelling.
right. And just look at the different ones we have. Jerome, young boy sitting on sofa wearing a green lizard costume. Adam, child wearing dinosaur pajamas sitting on a couch in a house. And Valerie, little boy dressed in dinosaur outfit, contemplating the horrors that exist outside. Great imagination, Valerie. And then Ming, a young child wearing a dinosaur costume, sits on a blue couch while eating a snack. So, and some people call it a dinosaur costume, and we've got Sarah calling it a onesie, and some people, you know, talk about the blue sofa. Some people talk about what's going on outside. So we actually do teach an alternative text tag class in our WeCollege online learning center. That's pretty interesting because we get into context and we get into how to navigate context for different groups of people. So really quick example of that is that we have found that some of our clients who work on, for instance, social justice issues may need to describe images in a different way. For instance, it may be more important for them to identify the race of the or the gender or non-binary status of somebody that is in an illustration or a photo. Whereas at WeCo, we identify disability because that's important to us, but we don't focus so much on identifying gender, things like that. So that alternative text tags can be something that can be a little sticky, but they can also bring wonderful needed context to an image. So
I see another issue here. We've gotten close to 1,000 words for our picture. You know, the picture's worth 1,000 words. That's a lot of these descriptions are kind of long for one image. If you got a bunch of pictures, that's going to turn into a lot of reading and a lot of reciting or braille or, you know,
yep, and our training
stuff that could send you in the wrong direction too.
Yep, and our training covers short alt text and long alt text and when to apply which. So we're going to wrap up so we can get to questions with these next steps. We all agree that to be accessible is to be inclusive. So we're going to talk about the positive next steps you can take to incorporate accessibility into the visual designs you and your organization creates. WeCo recommends these steps to begin a solid base of accessibility practices for visual professionals. The information that we're listing next is shown in a smart art flow chart with arrows. First, education is essential. If people don't know why they need to do something, they're far less likely to engage in the process. So helping people understand the practices and tools that make visual designs accessible is part of what WeCo does. But if you can also receive this information from other sources. Regardless, it's important that people understand the fundamentals of digital inaccessibility and how to foster inclusion with accessible practices. Second, analyze how your group is approaching the use of visual information. Do your processes lean towards applying visual design as purely visual? What processes need to change to include people who take in visual information in different ways? And this might include somebody who is neurodiverse. Analyzing this is the next step to getting everyone on the same page. Next, planning is important because it's the roadmap by which your organization and teams can work together to implement new processes. We can agree that something needs to be done, but unless we decide that alt tags need to be added to all photos, for example, and include that in the planning process, it's difficult to make accessible change happen. And finally, implementation. We recommend adding milestones and points in the timeline for process review to ensure the plan and the process are working. We also suggest that you consider the Accessible by Design initiative. Digital creative firms are banding together to help each other learn and to encourage accessible visual design. See their introduction video on their website, Accessible by Design, and I have that up on the screen as accessible/communications.com. So we'd like to open up for a few minutes of questions. And I think we probably have a few in the chat box. Ellen, is there any that I have missed that have come up?
There was a question around the time you were talking about assistive technology and screen readers that asked, can I ask a question because I'm a developer? What do you recommend being invented that's needed to have these days? I think that was around assistive technology part of the presentation.
Oh, a vendor? Or
Invented, sorry.
could you say that again?
Yeah. What do you recommend being invented that's needed to have these days?
I'm not exactly sure what is meant by that. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know the context for that. And we're a little short on time. So
Okay, I can move on.
looks
to
like
another
we
question.
had Troy asked, how does the accessibility match up with 508 PDF UA, or I think you mean WCAG compliance? So the standards by which most accessibility work done is in line with the W3C's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. In the US, the US Access Board, we've subscribed to version 2.0 AA. Most organizations we work with are at 2.1 AA. The great thing about the WCAG is that it has been folded into Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, which is the standard that government needs to follow for accessibility. WCAG is not a law. It is a guideline that was developed by a group of independent experts who want to make the web more accessible, called the W3C. And basically is something that is being freely applied to laws across the world. In fact, they have a wonderful webpage that shows how the WCAG is being applied into law. So what we're talking about today touches on those things. So looks like Georgia had, how long would it take? I'm sorry, getting questions here. Georgia, I lost your question amid dinosaur descriptions.
I believe it's how long would it take for a Braille laptop to interpret text?
Well, it depends on a few things. It depends on how dense and long the text is and how fast the reader, the person receiving it, reads the Braille. Okay. Any other questions, Ellen, coming in?
Yeah, we have, I'm having trouble making some visuals accessible where there's a combination of text and visuals, like an image of a whiteboard with lots of sticky notes with the text arranged in a certain way. Is there guidance on something like this?
Yeah, we have a excellent training in WeCollege that covers different aspects, different drill down on dealing with alternative text tags. I got really good at this when I was at the Department of Transportation because I got to help make things like plat maps where we were putting roads through accessible to non-visual users. But there are different ways that you can do that, and different ways that you can do it and not bog the user down too. So
We also have, what are the most frequent accessibility issues that you find in mobile applications?
well, that's not really what we're covering today. We're really focusing on visual design. Okay. And thank you to everybody who shared resources. Do we have any more questions, Ellen? As we're near the wrap up here.
I think Sarita asked about sending the recording of this session, which I can answer. We'll be sending that out after the event ends, so you'll get a copy of that. We use Adobe software such as Illustrator and InDesign to design graphic materials for our National Health Service here in the UK. Do you know if there are any built-in features to support the design process within these softwares?
There really is a growing number of tools, and Microsoft is getting much better at spelling out what those are. When I started on this work back in 2008, I created an accessible document conversion process for the Department of Transportation here in Minnesota. And I literally had to excavate all of the accessibility features and kind of jerry-rig them to work for for people I trained to do document conversion. And I used to have people say, where did you find this stuff? And I said, it's in Microsoft's manuals, but it's buried. And so that's wonderful that Microsoft products are becoming more accessible. I honestly do not know that much about InDesign, but I know that we are going to be preparing a training on InDesign that will be releasing into WeCollege. Well, I'm just going to wrap up because we are at time. So we'd like to just provide you with a few great getting started resources. And the first are a couple of upcoming free events for you. We do sponsor an accessibility meetup that occurs every other month. The next one is coming up on Monday, July 31st, 5:30 Central Daylight Time. This is our meetup does have a membership fee, but you can try it for 60 days for free. So we encourage you to do that. And we'll be featuring our member who is an accessibility designer from Optum Health, Bill Tyler, and he's going to be presenting a topic called Shift Left, Require Right. That was something that he taught at another conference. And then our next webinar, where you'll be able to meet us here, is Anatomy of an Inaccessible Website. That's coming up on Thursday, August 17th at 1 p.m. Ellen has slipped those links into the chat box for you. Also, I've been talking so much about WeCollege. This slide shows our We College lady sitting on a sofa. It's really excited. We just released this year, an accessible e-learning portal for individuals and teams. And we presently are offering it by invitation only. If you'd like to get an invitation or to learn more about We College, you can leave your information in the chat box for Ellen or Chad, or you can just contact us at accessinfo@WeCo and we will get in touch. We also have tons of free stuff on our website because we're mission-based. We have a free accessibility library, pre-recorded webinars like this, which are also on the YouTube channel, accessibility events, a free blog, and everything that you need to keep accessibility top of mind. The blog is something that we really love doing for you, and I encourage you to sign up. A few times a month, you are going to get an email that'll keep you up to date on changes in accessibility legislation, the industry, and perspectives of people living with disabilities. Thank you for being with us today. And if there's anything that you need after this session, you can contact us at accessinfo@theweco.com or 855-849-5050 extension 1. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time today.
All right.
Okay. It's a wrap. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.